Anger isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a slammed door. Sometimes it's a passive-aggressive, okay WhatsApp. Sometimes it's just going quiet for 3 days. Whatever shape it takes, if we don't learn to manage it, anger manages us. You know that moment when you get to the robots on your way home and there is not one working, no electricity, and suddenly a four-way stop turns into the Wild West. Nobody knows whose turn it is. Everybody's inching forward at the same time. Somebody hoots and somebody else hoots back out of principle. And within about 11 seconds, you've got a taxi driver leaning out his window, having a full theological conversation with a guy in a Fortuner about whose ancestors did this. And here's the thing. Nobody in that intersection would call themselves angry. Ask any one of them and they'll say, "No man, I'm not angry, I'm just frustrated. These municipalities of us are just ridiculous. They can't do anything right. That makes me frustrated." Frustrated. That's the word we reach for. It sounds much more respectable than angry. Frustrated sounds like it's the traffic's fault or it's a municipality's fault. But angry sounds like it might actually be about me. Years ago, I spoke to Pastor Errol about something I went through, a dark time in my life. And at one stage while I was speaking, he interrupted me and said, "Johnny, you keep saying frustrated, but you're describing anger. Frustrated is just a polite word we use so we don't have to own it." And then he said something that changed my life. He said, "Johnny, here's the reality, and here's your expectations. And everything in between is called anger and frustration. And you can't do anything about reality, but you can lower your expectations. And if you do that, look what happens to your anger." So today is obviously about anger, the fourth emotion in our series that's trying to be the boss of you. And I want to show you that anger doesn't just live in the loud, red-faced, shouting versions. It also lives in the quiet ones. The silent treatment, the passive-aggressive comment, the grudge you'll still carry from a conversation 3 years ago. Different packaging, but the same boss. Oh, and by the way, frustrated is just anger in a suit. There was actually a study done on this. Researchers found that drivers whose car had bumper stickers or window decals on them were statistically more likely to be involved in road rage incidents than drivers with plain cars. Didn't matter what the sticker said. It could be a rugby team or a family stick figure sticker or a matric year sticker. Just having something on the car that said, "This is mine, this is personal, this is who I am," made people more likely to explode when someone cuts them off. Isn't it interesting? The more we feel like something belongs to us, our space, our time, our reputation, our plans for the evening, the more anger shows up the second somebody messes with it. So here's an honest question for you today. Where in your life have you been calling something frustration when it's actually just anger wearing a name tag that says something more acceptable? Now, this whole series has one theme running underneath every single week. Whatever's boiling over on the outside started somewhere on the inside. And Jesus said it plainly. He said in Luke 6 verse 45, Jesus said, a good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart. And an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. What you say flows from what is in your heart. That means that sharp comment you fire off, that silence you giving someone right now, that hooting, the eye roll, the sarcastic, oh, that's fine. None of that started in the moment it came out. It was already sitting in the treasury. The moment just opened the door. Solomon wrote in Proverbs 4 verse 23, he said, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. So, if we're serious about not letting anger be the boss of us, we can't just manage our mouth in the moment. We have to guard what we're storing up long before the moment arrives. So here's something that might surprise you. Anger by itself isn't a sin. The Bible never tells us to feel nothing. It tells us to be careful what we do with what we feel. Paul wrote in Ephesians 4 verse 26 and 27, he said this, don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. Notice, it doesn't say, don't be angry. It just says, don't let it control you. Don't let it sit there overnight, unresolved, growing roots. There are actually two very different kinds of anger, and it matters which one you're carrying. You get the crusader anger, and that's a good kind of anger. Crusader anger is that anger on behalf of someone else who's being wronged. It's what fueled people to fight against child labor. It's what fueled people to push for women's rights to vote, to march for civil rights. It's anger that says, that's not fair, and it's not about me. That kind of anger has changed the world for the better over and over. But selfish anger is the other kind. And it's the one that wrecks homes, that wrecks friendships, that wrecks reputations. It shows up the second we don't get what we believe we deserve. You know, that parking spot, or that apology, or that credit, or that attention, the outcome we wanted. It's not about justice for someone else. It's about us not getting our way. Think about the last time you actually got angry. Was it crusader anger, standing up for someone else? Or was it selfish anger because you didn't get what you want? Let that sit for a second. You're getting angry for something because you're not getting what you want. So James, the brother of Jesus and one of the leading voices in the early church, wrote some of the most direct words in the whole New Testament about where our fight actually come from. He wrote in James 3 verse 13 to 16, he says, if you are wise and understand God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from wisdom. For jealousy and selfish ambition are not God's kind of wisdom. Wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind. James says real wisdom always produces humility. And arrogance, thinking you're the exception to the rules everyone else has to live by, is actually irrational. Because none of us choose our own birth, or none of us can outrun our mortality. We're not as in control as our anger wants us to believe we are. So James also wrote this. He said, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. Oh, he includes brothers and sisters. You must be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. Whatever your anger is trying to accomplish right now, like winning the argument or getting the apology or proving your point, James says it's not going to get you there. Anger might get you hurt, but it won't get you righteousness. The real fight is a what, not a who. When things go wrong in a relationship, we instantly look for the who. You know, my mom, or my boyfriend, or my roommate, or that guy in the group chat, or my dad. Someone to point at and to blame. But James says we're looking in the wrong place. Listen to what James says. What is causing the quarrels and the fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. Yo, that's harsh words. But James is saying the real source of almost every fight you've ever had isn't a who, it's a what. The desire sitting inside you that isn't getting satisfied. You can feel 100% justified. They broke a promise. They were unfair. They were late again. And the trigger underneath is still the same. I'm not getting what I want. It's like two toddlers fighting in the backseat of a car, both convinced that it's the other one's fault, both completely blind to the fact that they're both just upset they didn't get the window seat. And like a parent driving the car, God isn't interested in figure out who started it. He's asking both of us to stop staring at each other and look inward instead. Here's the one sentence that can defuse almost any argument. The moment you feel the temperature rising, you say, you know what part of the problem is, don't you? I'm not getting what I want. Say that sentence out loud, even mid-argument, and something happens. The temperature drops almost instantly. Not because the disagreement is resolved, but because it's an act of humility. You've stopped pretending you're the only victim in the story, and you're admitting that you're also a participant. It's called owning your slice of pie. Because, my friend, every argument has more than one slice. There's the other person's slice, what they did or didn't do, and then there's your slice, what you want and didn't get. Most of us are experts at pointing at their slice and blind to our own. Sometimes the most mature thing you can do mid-fight is send yourself to the room, not as a punishment, but to actually sit with this question: what did I want? What did I want here? That I didn't get? And then come back to the conversation once you can answer that honestly, and watch how differently it goes. The ultimate example of this is, if you follow Jesus, you already have a boss who modeled exactly what it looks like to lay down what he deserved for the good of someone else. Paul wrote this. He said, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Though he was God, he did not think of equally with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position. He humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. Yeah, Jesus had every single right to hold on to his status. He had the most legitimate case for I deserve better of anyone who has ever lived. Instead, he said no to what he was owed so that we could get what we actually needed. Following someone like that quietly pulls you away from, I'm not getting what I want, and towards, what does this other person actually need from me right now? Here's the thing. Strip away the actual argument, the dishes, the parking spot, the group, the chat, the curfew. Strip it all away. And almost every single time you find the exact same thing underneath. Not different desires, the same one, wearing different outfits. But the reality is you're not getting what you want. And think about it, that girl who goes silent for 3 days after a fight with her mom, she doesn't actually want silence. She wants to be heard. She just doesn't believe anyone's listening. So she stopped talking. You know that guy who explodes over a joke at his expense in the group chat? It was never really about the joke. It's, you made me the punchline instead of actually seeing me. Or that driver who loses it over being cut off in traffic. For 3 seconds, he was treated like he didn't exist. Like his presence on the road didn't matter enough to even get a glance in the mirror. And something in him screamed back, I'm here, notice me. You know that sibling who snaps when the other one gets praised at dinner table? It's not really jealousy about the compliment. It's the fear that says, doesn't anyone actually see what I do too? The friend who goes cold after their ideas get ignored in the group project and someone else say basically the same thing 5 minutes later and they get the credit, that's not really about the mark. That's, I spoke and it was like I said nothing. Every single one of those explosions, loud or silent, screaming or ice cold, but every single one is the same plea, just wearing Angus clothes. But it's pleading, see me, hear me, tell me I matter. In Exodus 3 verse 7 we read, then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people. I have heard their cries. I am aware of their suffering. My friend, before God even did a single thing to rescue his people, he said 3 things first. He said, I have seen, I have heard, I am aware. Before rescue, before answers, before anything changes, he makes sure they know they've been noticed. That's how deep this need runs. It's stitched into how God made us. So here's what I want you to sit with. That sentence we practiced earlier, I'm not getting what I want. It's not just a trick to end an argument faster. It's actually a doorway to the very thing you're fighting for. Because you cannot demand to be heard by someone while you refuse to listen to yourself first. The moment you get honest enough to say, here's what I actually wanted in this moment and I didn't get it. You have just done for yourself the exact thing you've been desperate for someone else to do for you. You heard you. And here's the part that should genuinely settle something in you today. You are not walking into every conversation, every group chat, every family dinner, empty-handed, begging strangers to notice you exist. You already have someone who has seen you completely, heard every version of your story, and knows exactly what you are carrying. before you've said a single word out loud. That doesn't mean people around you get to stop listening to you, but it means you don't have to fight or explode or go cold to prove you matter. You already do. You get to bring that into the next argument instead of anger. So the next time you feel the heat rising in the kitchen or in the car or in the group chat or at the dinner table, ask yourself the real question underneath it. What am I actually not getting right now? And who do I need to know is already hearing me? Anger, you're not the boss of me, because I don't have to fight to be heard, because I already am.